Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another edition of World Talks here on TVP World. I'm your host, Benjamin Lee, and please join me and my guests on this next interview. Serbia is currently experiencing its most significant political upheaval in decades as widespread anti-corruption protests challenge the government's authority. The demonstrations have evolved into a nationwide movement demanding transparency, accountability, and democratic reforms. The government's response, including the detention of activists and allegations of foreign interference, has further intensified public outcry and drawn international attention. Joining us today on TVP World to provide insight into these developments is Vejvoda, permanent fellow at the Institute for Human Sciences in Vienna, with extensive expertise in Balkan politics and democratic transitions. He offers us a comprehensive analysis of Serbia's current political landscape and its implications for the region. Hello, sir, and welcome to TVP World.
Good evening, and thank you for having me.
So we've seen the protests in Serbia going from a student protest saying the collapse of the canopy to something much greater and wider with, of course, a lot of government pushback as well. Can you give us a little bit of update of the current situation and how things are right there?
Indeed, you were right to say that from an initial student protest movement, it has become an all-civic protest movement, and we're well into the full 6 months of these protests that began roughly at the middle of November. The students' original demand that has been maintained is that all documents related to the tragedy that occurred with the canopy of the Novi Sad train station falling that killed 17 people has not yet been fully met. Even though there's an ongoing investigation, a number of people have been indicted between responsible politicians and engineers who were involved in the event that was, of course, led as a full-scale reconstruction of the railroad from Belgrade to Budapest, of which the Novi Sad train station reconstruction was a part. The student movement became a wholesale country movement where about 200 Serbian towns and cities were involved, and where numerous protests, including two very big ones in Belgrade in December and then in March 15th, between 300 and 350,000 people in each of those participated. The government organized what are called counter meetings with a much, much lesser number of people. And the basic demand is a return to the rule of law, to the separation of powers, to the possibility to have a fully independent judiciary and prosecution, and more media freedom, as well as a reform of the electoral conditions that would lead to free and fair elections. The big question has always been, how does this protest of the students for a demand for the rule of law translate into politics, and how do we get to a possibility to confront the current administration through elections? And that is what we're seeing at the current moment. The students have asked for premature elections. The government has responded that it will not happen at the moment. Excuse me. The president recently said that elections will happen in the span of time of about a year to year and a half, although most people predict that they will happen sooner rather than later. The universities throughout Serbia have been in a blockade and occupation. Citizens are supporting students by cooking literally for them every day to help them stay in this blockade. And there have been ongoing talks between the university leadership and the new government that is led by an unknown professor of endocrinology who took office several weeks ago. And these discussions are still ongoing without, at the moment, a visible solution. So we are in a sort of interregnum at the moment. The government is accusing the movement of being fomented from the outside by foreign funders. The government and the president call this a colored revolution that will be defeated, and that foreign engagement will not be tolerated. Of course, this is largely seen as a way in which the government wants to belittle what is truly a grassroots democratic movement that, after 13 years in power of this government, has led to dissatisfaction that has come out into the open, a loss of fear to what the government is doing, triggered, to repeat, by the horrible tragedy of 17 innocent people dying because of corruption that led to shoddy work on the reconstruction of the train station.
All right, thank you so much for rounding all of that up for us. Now, I'm curious because, like you mentioned, there's a lot of attempt from the government side to kind of crack down on these protests, and now we're seeing even more limitation of freedom of journalism as well as any sort of dissent. And how has that impacted the movement? Did it have the desired effect of stopping its momentum, or are they just pouring more fuel to the fire?
It's the latter. It has made the movement more determined, more convinced of the righteousness of the demands as value-based demands on democracy, human rights, and a system of rule of law. You mentioned at the beginning the people who were imprisoned on account of illegal tappings during a meeting. 3 of those people have been freed recently in the past 24 hours, and 3 are still in jail. But with pressure from the protesters to free them. So there have been attacks on journalists. There has been also an attempt to lessen this movement. I'm sorry, I have a bad cold. The movement has only been more convinced of the necessity to push on to make Serbia again a decent, fully democratic country. I also like to say, and this is important, we have local elections in 2 towns in Serbia on June 8th. And this will be a sort of bellwether of where the people stand. Of course, it's a litmus test for both the protests and for the government.
All right. Now, a lot of people are saying that perhaps European partners as well as the international community could probably put more pressure on President Alexander Vučić, but also we are seeing a little bit kind of slower action when it comes to really kind of shedding light on the issue. And people are kind of alluding to the fact that perhaps Vučić is still seen as a relatively important partner where they do not want to kind of step on too many toes. Do you think there's any validity to that?
Well, first of all, the European Union did have that sort of stance until about a month ago, when it understood the depth and the breadth of the protest movement. Both student and of the EU Enlargement Commissioner, Ms. Marta Kos, who said the demands of the students are in fact equal to the demands of the European Union, i.e. that Serbia should pursue democratic reforms, because Serbia and its government keep repeating every day that the strategic goal of the country is to join the European Union. And if that is the case, then these reforms must be upheld. We need to mention that Serbia has not advanced over these past 3 years in any way. No steps have been opened. The so-called Cluster 3 has not been opened, and it is still a question when it will be opened. Serbia has had a geopolitically Western-leaning stance in helping Ukraine in its war effort with exporting arms. It has, of course, close relations with the European Union in terms of trade and commerce. 65% of that trade is with the European Union, so Serbia depends largely on the European Union and the West. But as I said, the lack of movement on reforms has been now put forward, and pressure has come from the main European representatives. The president of the council, Antonio Costa, was in Belgrade. He repeated that Serbia is expected to follow the foreign policy line and
Right.
put
So we're
sanctions.
seeing that instead of adhering to more European standards, Vucic is actually kind of turning to Russia for some of the help. And we've also seen Vucic going to the Victory Day parade, kind of again turning away from your current EU norms. Do you think that's a sign of desperation?
President Vucic has, as you said, gone to Moscow in spite of the warnings, serious warnings coming from the European Union that he should not do that, that is going in a counter direction to the goals of the European Union. And it is a way, and that is the way it's been interpreted by most experts in Serbia, that was a way to try and keep those who vote for him on the right wing of the political spectrum and to assure that those votes are kept. Of course, this went down very badly because it was criticized at all levels of the European Union. And also, it needs to be noted with the Polish presidency of the EU and the Danish one that follows the Polish, it has been very clearly been made that now Montenegro and Albania are actually overtaking Serbia. They are now the front runners, and that Serbia is on hold, even though formally not on hold, and that if it wants to show that the strategic goal is the one that is pronounced, it should be actually moving fast. And the visit of EU High Representative Ms. Kaja Kallas to Belgrade and the region as of this evening will, I think, repeat that message that words need to be followed by deeds if Serbia wants to keep the direction of the EU.
Thank you so much, sir, for your input and insight despite your cold. Really appreciate you taking your time with us. Appreciate it. Thanks for being with us.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Cheers. And thank you for tuning into this edition of World Talks. But for more news, update, and commentary, please stay tuned to TVP World.